Yeah, you mentioned that a sensible designer would, I guess, design things that are on trend. Um, I guess how do you come up with that? Like, is that a matter of like using the latest greatest products, see what other people are doing? How do you just are there trends that are emerging right now that you're kind of keeping tabs on?
Yeah, so I try to keep my pulse on the current design trends all the time. I said on trend enough. You don't want to be like right. So usually you see trends emerging on Dribble. If you're not aware, like it's like a social media platform for designers, spelled Dribble. So it's three B's. um, and you can go on there and just see little snippets of work that designers post. Originally, I think it was supposed to be like 200 by 200 pixel images, maximum of whatever is going on. And since then, they've lifted those limits. Similar like Twitter, they've lifted their character limits and stuff. And so you can go in and see the kind of popular, cool things that people are posting. And usually, it's very trendy and not very functional. And so, like the big visual trend right now, for example, or at least for like the last little bit, has been neumorphism, which is like if you remember when Apple first came out with the iPhone, every app, every icon was intended to mirror like a real world counterpart. It was supposed to look realistic, like your phone book app looked like a phone book, um, or like your little black book diary thing or whatever. Well, that was skeuomorphism, and then it got shifted over to the far other end of the spectrum, where people are like, no, you don't need to make things literally look like what they look like, because it's really expensive, it's really complicated, and it's very difficult to make a cohesive looking design in skeuomorphism. So they went with a very flat aesthetic. So everything became like icons and iconography, and that's where like material design really shone with these kind of like more simplified forms. And now they've sort of some designers have started coming out with this kind of merged aesthetic where it's still kind of flat looking, but now you're incorporating these shadows to create these textures and differences in or perceived differences in height in your UI, and it looks beautiful, but it takes up so much space. It is absolutely not functional for anybody who is building like something that's not like a landing page or like a login form or something that only has like a couple of inputs and a button. Once you're dealing with something really complicated, like in Routific, we have a lot of panels, a lot of information, a lot of bits of information. Neumorphism wouldn't work at all. But visually, it looks great. But there's certain things from that aesthetic that you can borrow, like, for example, like a very clean color palette and using specific contrasting colors to make things pop really well, or uses of these like gradual lighter shadows that don't like just jump at your eyes being like very cheap looking, but they're a lot more subtle and a lot cleaner looking. So there's things that from there that you can borrow, but then there's like also other design trends, right? Like VR is I mean, it's been like a big thing for the last little bit, but even like with the metaverse announcement that Mark Zuckerberg did a little while ago, of kind of I guess he's trying to mimic Ready Player One, where everybody lives in like their like VR universe or whatever. Which is, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cool. Like once they come out with a MMO where I can be like a wizard in virtual reality space, man, I'm gonna be all there. think maybe we're a little bit far away from that, but even without that, like Microsoft, I think it was Microsoft released their really cool bit of product work. It was maybe a year ago now, I guess, where they had like the micro, almost like a Google Lens type thing, where you put on the glasses and you can sort of virtually interact with people who are working remotely. So sort of like taking this, you know, COVID enforced remote work environment and bridging it with a sort of physical space where you can like interact with people semi really. And I think there's like a really cool opportunity there. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, right? I don't know. Maybe it'll fizzle out into nothing. Maybe people will hate wearing these like VR headsets or goggles or whatever. But I feel like there's something that is potentially like really interesting there that could be done. And I know it's been experimented around with a lot with like Microsoft's the table stuff and Google Lens and Oculus Rift and all these like little things that have come out over the years. But they've been like getting steam, and I think that that is going to be a space that we're going to potentially be designing in um, more and more down the line. I mean, even like 3D has been like a big visual trend over the last like year or so, maybe a little bit more than that.
Is that coming back again?
Right. So it's you have like almost like a 3D environment that you're interacting with in your browser in some of these apps, and they're kind of like experimental apps. But now they're like being touted as this like next trend to like watch for in like 2021 and 2022 and stuff like that. And I remember when I was in university, this must have been like 2008 or something like that, and I took a class where one of the things we were supposed to do was make a toy store app. I don't know if you remember this. You must have seen me working on it, but we decided to make it in Flash and had like a plugin for navigating three-dimensional. Or sorry, we had a plugin from I think it was Cinema 4D to render out into like an FLV file that you could then have a whole bunch of frames in that you could navigate between, and we created like a Flash site to move around in a 3D space. And I remember our prof being like, yeah, this is kind of cool, but it's totally impractical, and just like totally making fun of us for it. And now it's just coming right back around. Uh,
The thing if I find interesting is with 3D, right? Like they were selling like 3D TVs several years back, and it was supposed to be that hot new thing, and then it just fizzled out. So as a designer and really you're making decisions that could last for many years, sometimes decades, depending on how often that product might get updated, and also a lot of money investment going, whether it's from the amount of time you're spending, but really the amount of time all the developers build your vision. How do you make sure that you don't fall into the trap of selecting a technology that ends up going to the waste bin?
yeah. So as a general rule, we don't work on anything that's not proven, right? Like we let companies like Facebook, especially in the startup world, like you're going to let companies like Facebook take the charge for the most part on a lot of these things. If the core of your product is not to be innovative in a technological sense, not necessarily not to be innovative, because I think Rotific is actually quite like technologically innovative, but innovative in the sense of like coming out with this like crazy new revolutionary technology, right? Like we're innovative in terms of like our algorithms, our user experience, like other aspects of it. But the goal of the company isn't to come out with like the next big way to interact with your software. It not kind of like how Oculus Rift wanted to do it, or how like PlayStation VR does it, or something like that, right? I think that so when it comes to that, like just that should be your first litmus test for picking a technology, is like, is this actually going to work, and is this something that people have actually asked for? I mean, before we started recording the podcast, you were saying that the Amazon's core principle is to be like the most customer centric company in the world. And that's at the end of the day, like the key is, do people actually want this? Because nobody asked for 3D TVs. Nobody likes to wear glasses. Like, especially if you, like me, you already wear glasses. What do I need another pair of glasses for on top of these things, so I can watch TV for like a faux sense of realism? I'm like, I didn't ask for that. I don't care about a slight bit of depth in my, perceived image. Like, it's kind of cool to go watch Avatar in 3D, but nothing has really compared to that in terms of a 3D experience for going to the movies. Where I think the VR stuff is a little bit different is the VR becomes a tool for you to be able to meaningfully interact with something, right? With the space around you. So for anybody who's living in the lower mainland, like there's a few VR arcades that you can go into, and you put on the VR headset and you're moving around in a physical space, and interacting with it, and it is insanely cool. You're moving in a 1-to-1 ratio through this virtual environment.
Actually, our our buddy Jonathan, who worked at Solid Grounds, he owns one of those VR places out in Richmond, Sandbox VR. He owns the franchise there.
He owns that. I've been there a ton of times. I didn't know John owned that.
Yeah, he's a part owner of that, and I think they're starting a couple of more. But that is one of the coolest experiences I've had, where you like put on the suit and you're right there with your buddies, but then you're like killing zombies, and it's such an amazing experience.
The beautiful thing is, like, it's not even a suit. It's just like a set of bracelets and anklets that you put on, and there's this vest and the headset. And the headset isn't actually like tied into anything. It's and not only that, but the before I went to Sandbox, not to plug John's company, I guess, but before I went to Sandbox, um, I had to take my glasses off to use VR headsets, and I'd always wind up with a bit of a blurry image because like I don't have 20/20 vision. Like my vision is pretty bad, but this place has little lenses that they put in as corrective lenses into your headset. So they've already started to accommodate the user demographic that is liable to use their headsets. Since you can't use it with glasses, we might as well just put your corrective lenses as inside of it as part of it. And it's really good. It's really cool.
That's a very inclusive thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I really appreciated it when I put it on. I was like, oh, this is great, because I remember like the glasses have been an issue for like ever, right? I went, my wife and I, like, well before COVID, we went snorkeling in Mexico to go swim with the sea turtles. And sea turtles are huge, and you can see them. But as we're like swimming around, I had to take my glasses off and put the snorkel on. And Leanna, who does have like 20/20 vision, she's pointing at stuff and is like, oh, hey, look, cool, look at that squid that's concealed as part of like the sand or something. She's like, can you see it? And I'm like, no, I can't see anything. Of course I can't. And so coming into like the VR space, I was kind of expecting to have a bit of a blurry experience or whatever, and just to see that and like the change in technology from like the first time I went to a VR arcade to that next time that I went, I was like, oh man, this has progressed a long way, and being able to move around in a physical space was great. So I think like, and not to say that you necessarily is going to be like a giant bulky headset. Like I think they're going to probably get slimmed down, get into something that's more like glasses oriented, maybe similar to Google Glass, but a lot more functional, I guess. I don't remember what the exact issues with Google Glass were that never took off, but that idea of like that augmented reality space and being able to interact with it in a meaningful way, I think is a potential like very real future technological trend that maybe, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, I have no idea what the timelines are, but I can see that being like a real thing to interact with. Now, the question to ask afterwards is, even if this becomes like a real trend, is this still useful for logistics software? And the answer is probably not. Right? Like, I mean, maybe, right? Like, depending on what you're doing, maybe there's a potential to interact with a map in like faux, like real space, and like you can clearly zoom in on a particular route and pinpoint specific stops and maybe move them around between routes or something like that, or be able to see like where your driver is in real time and like pull up these reports or something like that. Maybe there is, but it's probably not going to be something that's doable in the near term for sure. Um, and so for now, you make that technological decision, like, no, browser based app, right? Like the lowest point of entry to say, you log in, you have all of this accessible regardless of which computer you use. You don't necessarily need to worry about saving files to your hard drive. It all gets like logged into the cloud. All of this information is readily available, then syncs to your mobile app or whatever else is going on, right? It's easier to sync with your drivers. It opens up an API that maybe people don't want to use their front end. They just want to be able to tap into our algorithm. And we have an option for that, for clients to do that instead, and tie into whatever software they're currently using. So it's all driven by client need, right? Like, can we expect like, a mom and pop shop, 60-year-old lady who runs, I don't know, a flower shop and needs deliveries once in a while? Can we really expect her to log in to a VR headset and invest, probably like $4,000 into the actual technology to be able to use the VR headset properly and then interact with their software? That's a bit of an unreasonable thing to ask. So it's always dictated by the client. It's always dictated by the user. Every decision that you make, I think.